Days in the Sun. A Journey to the West fan fiction written by Jukebox Draws. Read by Jukebox Draws. Chapter 2. Stay. Sanzong stepped out of his boat and tugged it ashore. He took off his wooden sandals as they began to sink into the soft white sand of the beach. The mountain was absolutely beautiful, and the monk wasted no time taking out his sketchbook and brush-tipped pen. He liked to document what he saw via artwork occasionally, as he found it comforting. The sketch was rough, barely anything by the monk's usual standards, but he figured it was good enough. He hadn't even noticed the small group of monkeys that crowded in front of him, as he was so engrossed in capturing the beauty of the scenery onto the paper. "Oh, do you want to see?" The monk turned the book around, showing the monkeys as if he were showing a storybook to a group of toddlers. They all gathered around, staring at the picture, then back at the mountain in awe. "It's nothing special—" "Hey!" the monk cried out as the papers were snatched from his hands by one of the bigger monkeys of the group. The creature seemed to laugh at him, a silly ape laugh, before it scampered off towards the mountain. Sanzong ran, not bothering to replace his sandals on his feet, but instead dropping them into the sand. "You get back here with that!" Sanzong pushed through the bushes and hopped over rivers, chasing the mischievous little creature through the woods up to the giant waterfall. Seemingly on command from the ape, the waters parted, and the monkey jumped through. Sanzong hesitated for a second, but seeing the macaque bouncing and leaping up and down, waving his papers in the air, seemingly mocking him, was enough to convince him to follow the creature through the parted waters and into the cavern beyond. The occupied throne was encapsulated in shadow, so the monk didn't notice the pair of golden eyes watching him from the darkness as he chased the monkey around the cavern. He grabbed it by the scruff of its neck and lifted it up when he finally caught it. "I'll be taking my drawings back now." The monk took the papers from the small creature. The macaque's eyes watered, and it began to cry, dramatically and very loudly. "Who are you?" the stranger on the throne roared, making his presence known with his booming voice and a slam of his staff on the stone floor. Sanzong nearly screamed as he dropped the monkey and whipped around to see the shadow of a figure sitting on the throne that he hadn't even noticed was there. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't think anyone lived on this island." The monk stuffed his hands into his sleeves, hiding his drawings within the inner pocket of his robe. The stranger let out an animalistic growl. "And who do you think you are to come onto my mountain and chase my subjects?" He hated when someone encroached on his territory. His subjects were his, and his alone. Who was this simple monk to come into his throne room and take things from his monkeys? I'm sorry," Sanzong tried to apologize. The stranger roared again, shaking the walls of the cavern with his throaty snarl. The monk snapped his mouth shut and gripped his robes tighter. "Your apologies mean nothing to me." Clutching a peach in his hand, the stranger took a large bite of the stone fruit, juices dripping down his chin and staining his hands and face. Sanzong's stomach grumbled as seeing the fruit made him realize that he had skipped lunch that day. I'm ashamed of myself. It was not my intention to intrude." The monk was down on his knees now. "You are the master of this island?" "I'm the king of this island." The stranger took another bite of the fruit. Sanzong's stomach growled again, louder this time. The monk flushed with embarrassment as the grumbling resounded throughout the cavern. The stranger paused mid-bite of his peach. You're hungry?" Tossing the fruit away and swallowing his bite, he leaned in closer. "Yes, I skipped lunch in my haste to come here." Sanzong gulped. There came a hum from the stranger as he scratched at the hair on his temple. He called down a hallway, and another monkey brought another bowl of fruits. "Come closer, human." A hand reached out of the shadows, black pointed fingernails beckoned the monk closer. Sanzong got back to his feet and inched forward. I can't see you. It's too dark." The monk squinted, trying to see the stranger better. A long, furry tail curled around his waist and pulled him closer. Sanzong nearly screamed again, but managed to bite down on his robe to keep the sound from coming out. "Never mind that." The voice was closer now, and the monk could see the outline of a face in the darkness. "Eat." A fruit was shoved into Sanzong's mouth. He let out a startled yelp that was muffled by the peach. He instinctively bit down on the fruit, and his mouth was flooded with sweetness. It was better than any other peach he had ever been given, ripe and perfectly juicy. He immediately grasped at the fruit, but it was pulled back into the shadows by the hand. The stranger tisked, his other hand finding its way to the monk's back, pulling him into his lap. Sanzong looked down. He saw strange, hairy feet with the same black nails that disappeared into tightly wrapped leg guards. The stranger's pants were black, and he wore immaculate skirts of tiger skin and hawk feathers all tied tightly around his cinched waist. Anything above that was still covered in shadow. The hand with the peach came back once Sanzong swallowed the bite he had taken. His hunger overcame him at once, and he took another bite, letting the stranger feed him like a child. "So, tell me," the king's thumb stroked over the robes of the monk's back absent-mindedly, "what brings you to my mountain?" "Well," Sanzong swallowed the bite he took. It was rude to speak when his mouth was full. "I came here to seek counsel with you, on behalf of the country of Aulai. There have been many complaints about our trade routes being disturbed and fishermen's boats sinking. They say your army has been pelting them with rocks and stealing their belongings." "They came onto my territory uninvited. They paid the price," the king said simply. Sanzong huffed. "What if we worked out an arrangement? We could reach a compromise that could benefit us both." The monk squeaked as the stranger's hand reached into his robe and drew out the papers he had hid there. Eyes in the dark studied the paper intently. "Did you make these?" he asked. Yes." The monk blushed and pulled his robes further around himself as if the hand were going to return to search for more drawings in more intimate places. Suddenly the same tail was lifting him up and bringing him up to another part of the room, where there was a large piece of parchment set up with brushes next to it on a pedestal. "You," the king set the monk down in front of the parchment. "Paint me," he commanded. Sanzong was caught off guard. Never before had he been asked to paint royalty, especially by a complete stranger. "I can't see you!" He squinted as the stranger's face was still engrossed in shadow. "If I am to paint you, you must come into the light." Sanzong shakily reached for the brush, too hesitant to disobey this powerful creature. It was with this the king faltered. He joked about his stage fright, but it was rare that he was asked to display himself in front of someone that wasn't an excellent display of power or military prowess. But nevertheless he stepped out, and allowed the strange, pale, chubby little monk to see his face. Sanzong expected something different than the face of a human, but he didn't quite expect the face of a monkey. Not quite animal, but not quite person. A long face framed with hair around the temples, a deep copper, almost red color that covered the rest of his head and the nape of his neck, giving it the illusion of a human hairstyle. High cheekbones marked with peach-colored skin and a shortened snout. His thick eyelashes and bold black eyebrows almost hid what was underneath them. The bright gold of his eyes that almost made Sanzong think he was staring into the sun. The monk was scared to say that this monkey king was almost handsome in a sense, as his subjects claimed him to be, though Sanzong never considered himself good judgment of these sorts of things. "Happy now?" the king spoke, revealing pearly white teeth and canines sharp as swords. "Yes." Sanzong felt the need to obey the monkey's request to be painted. Surely if he appeased him it would make negotiations a lot easier. So he picked up the brush as the king stood on the pedestal in a regal pose. Sanzong had to stop himself from staring. The king was adorned in golden armor, and the simple golden fillet around his head was as good as any ornate crown. Sanzong got to work, sketching and painting this stranger to the best of his ability. The king constantly fidgeted and tried to peek over the paper to see. The monk gave him a look and told him to stand back on the platform like a parent scolding their child. The monkey king would pout, but obey, and stand back on the pedestal in the same pose, before attempting to move again a few minutes later. "How's this?" Sanzong turned the paper around to show the king. It was silent for a moment, until suddenly the monkey's eyes went wide. He began to stomp his foot on the stone floor. He began to bounce up and down on the balls of his feet and flap his hands in front of his face. At first the monk believed the king to be outraged, believed the king to be outraged, but that couldn't be right. He was smiling. "It's perfect! It's wonderful! It's marvelous!" the king declared, continuing to bounce and stomp his feet. I'm just so happy!" The monk's cheeks flushed a pretty pink. Never once had anyone claimed his art to even be mediocre, much less marvelous and wonderful. The paper was ripped from his hands as the simian took it to examine it further. He somersaulted, hooted and hollered with joy for a solid minute before calling a group of his monkeys into the room to see. They jumped onto Sansang, clapping their hands and making a fuss. "Thank you. I am glad you like it." The monk quickly took the monkey off his head and set it back down on the floor. The creature scampered away as one of its brothers hugged Sansang's leg. "They like you." The king smiled wide as he got closer to Sansang, rolling up the parchment and handing it to one of his monkeys to take away. "You're exactly the human I've been looking for. You must stay here. You'll be well taken care of, I promise you." "Stay here?" The monk did a double-take. Indeed, he figured he would have to spend the night on the island, but he never believed he would be invited in so willingly. "Yes, you must stay, forever and ever." The Monkey King bounced like a child and lifted the monk into his arms without a second thought. Sanzong cried out and wrapped his arms around the monkey's neck. "Forever?" Sanzong began to sweat a bit. Both from the shock of being lifted, this monkey was incredibly strong, and the proposition that the king would forcibly keep him on this island. "Yes, was I not clear?" He furrowed his brow and pouted his lip in a questioning expression. "I can't stay here forever, your majesty," the monk began to say. Baring his teeth, the simian growled. "You will stay here, forever," he snapped, hating the idea of not getting what he wanted or being told no. Sanzong shut up quickly at the sudden harshness in the Monkey King's tone. Suddenly, the monk had an idea. A terrible idea, but the darkness that overcame the simian's eyes told him that he was quickly running out of options. "If I did, would you stop attacking the trade ships and the fishermen?" "Yes," the king agreed after a moment of heavy silence. The monk sighed. "You have my word." "Done." To be continued in Chapter 3.